I finished watching Durarara in November 2023. And as soon as I started wading into fandom waters, I was quite surprised to find that people actually shipped Shizuo Heiwajima with Izaya Orihara. Now, I must provide a disclaimer before we start. I understand and accept that fanfic ship preferences are all in the eye of the beholder. Fans have every right to ship characters they like with whomever they want. I say this because I have been in many fandoms in my years as a nerd, and I too have sometimes followed fringe ships and pairings. This video is not about whether a pairing is canon or not. I love AU pairings, and I totally get the appeal of pairing the strong, reluctant hero or anti-hero with the proverbial bad boy, or sometimes even a villain of the story. But I gotta make a case for why I think the Shizuo and Izaya ship, that is, Shizaya, makes no logical sense. For a romantic ship to make sense to me, there has to be some degree of common ground between the characters. There has to be at least a semblance of positivity between them. Enemies to lovers tropes can be fantastic and amazing to write and follow. Stories based on characters that start out as adversaries and then slowly, over the course of time, find common ground, become friends, and eventually lovers, can be a beautiful journey to take. But in all those ships, there has to be some sense of mutual respect between the two characters. This is something I find completely missing between Shizuo and Izaya. I read a post at the start of my Durarara journey where someone said that Shizaya, as a ship, is not toxic because there's depth to the animosity they feel for each other. That it's not fair to call it just plain old hatred because there's so much more to it. They have history. It is deep. But I've been reading the light novels and the manga after watching the show, and unfortunately, I don't see that connection. In the last volume of the light novel, this is how Ryohgo Narita describes Shizuo and Izaya's last fight.
To the two longtime foes, this fight was an undeniable turning point. But for such a momentous occasion, it certainly started in unmemorable fashion. Then again, given that their mutual hatred essentially stemmed from the feeling of "I just don't like the guy," perhaps it was also fitting that it happened unceremoniously. Their astonishing, overwhelming battles going back to school days made you doubt the accuracy of that old saying, "The more you fight, the closer you really are." There was no high-minded chivalry in this duel, no respect for the other side whatsoever. And in the case of this stunning battle in the wee hours of the morning, there was once again not a shred of respect for the other combatant. Not once did either of them ever view the other with the positive aspects inherent in the word rival.
From reading that, it is clear to me that there is nothing particularly deep about their rivalry. They start out as enemies and end as enemies. The only thing that progresses through the course of the story is the level of animosity and disdain they both feel towards each other. Now, don't get me wrong, Shizuo hates Izaya very much. There's no doubt about it. But the intensity with which Izaya hates Shizuo is on a whole other level, and it only gets worse as time goes by. Shizuo is loud and chaotic when he gets mad, as we're shown time and again in the anime. But if you watch closely and read the novels, you realize that he never does anything to truly hurt Izaya. Yes, they've been in fights, gotten into major brawls right from the first time they met. But Izaya has always been able to get away. And when Izaya was out of Ikebukuro, Shizuo was relatively peaceful. He didn't go after him, he didn't even think about him. He was just glad Izaya was not around to mess with him. He only got upset when Izaya came back to Ikebukuro because that meant he'd bring trouble. And he always did. Izaya, on the other hand, always went out of his way to hurt Shizuo and cause him problems, even from afar. Izaya saw him as a monster, and pushing his buttons was like a game to him. He liked to provoke Shizuo and watch him react so that he could continue to be labeled as this unhinged creature. In the anime, it's clear that even before Shinra introduced the two of them in high school, Izaya was aware of who Shizuo was, and Shizuo knew Izaya was someone keeping an eye on him. In fact, I will bet that Izaya had started sending the thugs to attack Shizuo to see his reaction even before they'd met. Instinctually, Shizuo knew Izaya was trouble. That's why he told him right off the bat that he pissed him off. He knew Izaya was not someone he wanted to know, and Izaya realized that Shizuo wasn't someone he could use and manipulate. So what does he do? He provokes him, pulls a knife on him, slashes him, and then pays a guy to run him over with a truck. Now I've seen the other argument too, that Shizuo was too unhinged and angry when it came to Izaya, and if only he'd calm the heck down, things would be fine. After all, it wasn't like anything Izaya did to Shizuo caused any permanent damage. When you get right down to it, Shizuo was indestructible, wasn't he? He wasn't really hurt by that knife attack. And he got up after being hit by that truck too, didn't he? Then why the hell did he always erupt in uncontrollable anger every single time Izaya was around? I'll tell you why. It was because Izaya always treated Shizuo as less than human. From the moment he laid eyes on him, Izaya went out of his way to cause Shizuo problems and make his life miserable. Izaya got him framed for crimes multiple times, once created a situation so bad the police had to call the riot squad on Shizuo. He made Shizuo lose jobs, made his famous brother a target of a stalker who wanted to hurt him. He directly paid people to run Shizuo over with a truck more than once. And no one can tell me he wasn't behind Harada getting the gun he shot Shizuo with in Season 1. He then did the thing he loves doing, got into the dark corner of the internet, and found Akane Awakusu in an internet chat room, a vulnerable child and the granddaughter of the mafia head, and manipulated her into thinking Shizuo was a hitman who wanted to kill her family. This indirectly led to Shizuo getting framed for murder and then being chased for days by the Yakuza. Izaya had lured him into a trap he'd specifically set for him. And at the end of the anime, Izaya tried to kill not just Shizuo, but also someone he cared for, that is Verona, only to get under his skin and see how he reacts. Izaya says in the light novels that he had expected to control and manipulate Shizuo like everyone else, but was frustrated to find that Shizuo couldn't be controlled, because that made him unpredictable. Izaya claims to love humans, but thinks of Shizuo as less than human, as an amoeba, an animal, a monster, dumb as an ox, worthy of nothing but hatred and disgust. And how does Shizuo think of Izaya? As a cockroach, a flea, a parasite that sucks your blood before you even know it. These are not character traits you wish to see described in a romantic pairing. Shizuo's hatred of Izaya is a direct reaction to the abuse he's received at his hands for years, when all he'd wanted was to live a peaceful life. The reason why he has such a visceral reaction to Izaya every time he's around is because Izaya goes out of his way to hurt him. There's no secret love lost between them. Just as shown in the anime and written in the light novels, there's nothing noble or charismatic about their rivalry. It started out as a juvenile high school feud, but when Shizuo continued having friends who cared for him despite him actively trying to push them away, Izaya's disdain for him grew, because he, who claimed to love humanity, could not attract people. No one really trusted him. No one truly liked him. Even Shinra said in the novels that Izaya had not a shred of goodness in him. But this monster, whom he considered less than human, somehow had people who cared for him. And that Izaya couldn't stand. By the end, this hatred had turned into a seething rage. He'd never seen any humanity in Shizuo, but now he wanted him eliminated, destroyed, cursed as a murderous beast, even if it meant he had to die at his hands. Izaya says in last volume of the light novel, "I don't care if I die, but I don't want it to be at the expense of this monster surviving." It is quite apparent, of the two of them, if there was anyone who had a fixation on the other, it was Izaya. He had this narcissistic superiority complex, or as Simon once told him, a Shizuo complex, where Izaya was obsessed with the notion of defeating Shizuo, while at the same time considering Shizuo as something subhuman. It was not anything positive in the slightest. Shizuo's anger only erupts when Izaya hurts or manipulates the people around him, like his brother and young Akane Awakusu. And towards the end, the trigger was Verona. Seeing her get first manipulated and then hurt and nearly die at Izaya's hands turned Shizuo's anger into cold fire. And that's why it was only Verona who could stop him in the end. Shizuo would have definitely killed Izaya otherwise. He only stopped when he saw Verona was going to become a murderer to stop him. Verona, who had started nearly at the same place as Izaya, seeing Shizuo as a challenge to defeat and conquer, had been changed by spending time in Shizuo's presence. She nearly died trying to save Shizuo, and he knew that. And in the end, she saved his soul by not letting him murder Izaya, and thus pulled him back from the edge of the abyss. That was everything to Shizuo. Verona is the anti-Izaya in Shizuo's story on Durarara. But that is a video for another time.